Hello again, I'm Doug Smith. This is the 20 September 2013 edition of Portsmouth This Week, the voice of Portsmouth Town Hall. This week our focus is going to be on the veterans organizations in town, and because these folks do so much for our community. And I've got two really highly qualified guests here today to help me discuss that. First is George Wardwell on my left here. He's the past post commander of Post 18 of the American Legion and currently the treasurer. And I know George, he was our parade chairman for the 375th, did a magnificent job, and he's well wired into the veterans organizations in the state here of Rhode Island. So welcome, George. Also want to welcome Carlton Johnson, who's our right-hand man down there at VFW Post 5390. He's the senior vice commander, past post chaplain, and past commander of the VFW. So welcome, Carlton. I appreciate both of you guys taking your time to come in today. Just a couple of kind of general questions. We've got, how many veterans organizations are there in Portsmouth itself? Either one of you guys could.
George, go ahead.
Two.
Got two.
Okay.
One American Legion post and one VFW post.
Okay, what about the island, Aquidneck Island as a whole?
Actually, there are, same thing, VFW and American Legion. The American Legion has two posts on Aquidneck Island, and the VFW has three. The one in Portsmouth, and then 4487 in Middletown, and another VFW post also meets with 4487. So there are basically three VFW posts and two American Legion posts on Aquidneck Island.
Okay, so essentially we're talking about the two premier veterans organizations, American Legion and the VFW. I guess my question is, how do you guys differ? And you know, I know the VFW, the membership requirement is a little bit different, but how would you guys characterize, you guys are both members of both, so how would you characterize the difference between the two organizations?
I think the main difference is that to become a member of the VFW, you must have served in an overseas combat environment. And basically, anyone who is eligible for the various medals or ribbons proving that they served in an overseas combat situation would make them eligible for VFW membership. And as a veteran, I think almost anyone would be eligible for the American Legion, whether they served overseas or not.
Okay, now, how big are both of your organizations? Let me start with the American Legion. Here in Portsmouth.
Our American Legion post in Portsmouth, we have about 135 members.
Okay. And
VFW post, we have 162 members as of today. Many of them live in Portsmouth, but we also have quite a few that have joined our Portsmouth post and now have moved on. They live out of state, or
but they still maintain membership.
But they still maintain their membership.
Yeah.
Of the 162, we have 78 life members, and then the remainder they do an annual membership.
Okay. Now, of those two numbers, 135 and 165, about, there are guys like you that belong to both.
Yes,
right?
sir.
So I assume both of you guys are life members?
Yes.
I'm not a life member of the American Legion. I am of the VFW.
VFW, as I am, actually.
And I'm not a life member of the American Legion either. I'm about 45 years of American Legion post over in central New York, where I first joined.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a life member of the Tiverton Unit 5392 over in Tiverton, and that's because my father was there for a long time, and I used to go over there with him all the time.
Mm-hmm.
A great bunch of guys there and a great bunch of guys here. I really, we really appreciate all the stuff you guys do.
Excuse me one second, Doug. I'm not sure if it come up later on, but when we mentioned VSOs, Veteran Service Organizations, each of the posts that we have on the island in Portsmouth, we have auxiliary units associated with our posts. Yeah. So
that's a good point. I was going to bring that up.
Okay.
Because one of the ways that people who are not veterans themselves can get involved is by, now correct me if I'm wrong, you need to have a family member who is a service member to become a member of the auxiliary, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay, but then you can join and you can take part. The auxiliaries do a lot of the work. I know the women's auxiliaries particularly are very active.
They're very important in doing fundraisers to provide funds for the various programs that they have. The VFW Ladies Auxiliary and also the Men's Auxiliary, they put on various fundraisers. One of the things that the Ladies Auxiliary has taken over now is providing a lot of items to be shipped to troops that are overseas. So there's a lot of expense involved as far as the mailing goes of the boxes.
Sure.
And they get a lot of fundraisers to get those funds available so we can mail it to the troops overseas.
Yeah, and that brings me back really to the mission. The mission statements of all of these things. In fact, Carl, maybe you could read the one for the VFW. It's a little bit different, and it was formed a little bit earlier than the American Legion.
Yeah, the VFW basically started in 1898, and after a few groups had gotten together, that was really the formation of the VFW. But let me read the mission statement for the VFW. To foster camaraderie among United States veterans of overseas conflicts, to serve our veterans, the military, and our communities, to advocate on behalf of all veterans. And that's the VFW mission statement.
Yeah, and I think the American Legion was probably fairly similar, right? The point is, you guys are the advocates for vets, and I remember reading the history, a little bit of the history of the VFW, and the American Legion was formed after World War I in a similar context. Mm-hmm. These guys were coming back, they're getting no care, and people just stepped up and say, wait a minute, you know, these people are veterans, they're over there on our behalf, and we need to take care of them when they get back. And I think, as most people know, we're still kind of deeply involved in some conflicts in the Middle East and Afghanistan, and potentially elsewhere. And these kids are going over there for 2 and 3 deployments. And so as organizations whose mission is the care of veterans and making sure veterans get what's due to them, the current time is very important that you guys step up as you've been doing and advocating. You know, I think it's either the American Legion or the VFW that's having a suicide prevention week thing. They're jumping on board that. We have so many kids coming back with PTSD.
That's the Legion, yeah. On our national magazine, we're emphasizing the suicide as an epidemic, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that at no time in our history, probably just because of the extreme stress of these things that they're going through. It happens in every war. We all know that. Mm-hmm. But this extreme stress these kids go through, I think your missions are more vital than ever. And I think, therefore, you guys and your organizations, in my view, deserve the full support of everybody, every citizen in the United States.
I think one of the other things I'd like to mention, both the American Legion and the VFW receive a monthly magazine, as George just mentioned with the American Legion. The VFW, and this happens to be the September issue, and there's a lot of information about veterans. And the article in here is, how well do you know your VA benefits? And members of the organizations can read these articles and probably get a lot of good information to help them. And that's where we talked about the service officers can help these veterans get enrolled in the VA system and provide benefits that they might not be aware of. Yeah,
now, we were talking earlier, if someone, and this might be a way that people can understand what you guys do and how you do it. If there's a kid that comes back and he feels like he's in trouble and he feels like he's alone back here after a 3 or 4 year tour, you know, he's not a lifer. He wants to find out, am I eligible for any VA benefits or GI Bill benefits? What can he do?
I would probably say the best thing is to contact either George or myself, because George is a service officer with the VFW, and I've had some training in that. What we would do would interview the individual, get some basic information, and then provide that information to the state service officer. And he or a member of his staff would basically come down to the individual's home or place of interview, get the information, and start the enrollment process into the VA system so they would be eligible for VA healthcare benefits. And one of the things, as a member enrolled in the VA healthcare system, prescriptions are available and a lot of medical assistance that they might need.
I think we talked too earlier, George, one of the issues are people's veterans' families. You know, somebody passes away, a veteran, and his family would like to see what kind of burial benefits or whatever are available. I assume they could do the same thing, contact you folks?
Exactly.
I guess the key role of the service officer, which is a term I just recently heard, seems to be in the middle of all this stuff. And so you guys essentially jump in and advocate specifically for these individuals.
Yes, we do.
And the guy at the state does that. I think also people need to know that you guys are major lobbyists for veterans up in Washington.
Locally and Washington.
And that's another reason I think for people to support you guys, because I can't think of any American who doesn't think that we should support our veterans when they come back. People need to realize, you know, Vietnam was different. Nobody wanted us to be in Vietnam, and none of us that were there wanted to be in Vietnam, and it's not like we had a choice. But when we came back, it seems like the people blamed us for Vietnam. I'm delighted to see this kind of turned around in this Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts.
You mentioned about burial benefits. One of the things I might suggest any family who has lost a veteran, most of the funeral directors are very well informed about the benefits, providing flags for the graves, gravestones, and so forth. So when a veteran does pass, I strongly suggest they discuss that with the funeral directors.
Yeah, most funeral directors probably understand this.
They certainly do.
I want to back up just for a second,
Yes.
because contacting us is great, but if you have a desire to find out factual information about any of these organizations, they have the national websites that
Yes.
are full of information, like www.va.gov or www.americanlegion.org. Those national websites contain a wealth of information covering
Absolutely.
a lot of the stuff we do locally. So
Yeah.
I push the websites.
Same thing for the VFW. You can get in there and get all kinds of information on the various programs, even including the scholarships that they have.
Yeah, that's another thing, because I know you guys do an awful lot of community service as well. Primary mission, supporting veterans, making sure they get what's due to them, making sure they get the health care they need. You guys work on the veterans' home, supporting that. But you do a lot of other things, scholarships, scout things. I know you guys are connected with those. Can you guys talk? I could talk forever about what you guys did for the 375th, because you're my right-hand guys on this thing. But you want to talk a little bit about some of the community service things you guys do?
I would do the American Legion. Our main purpose in life is to promote Americanism and patriotism. So we do we gather and collect torn and tattered flags to offer respectable retirement for those flags. Each year we try to do one big event burning. In conjunction with the VFW, they do the same. But we have the Poppy Crusade that we do annually that's supposed to support a lot of our programs. Locally, we try to help out the Naval Sea Cadets. Navy League, we sponsor Naval Sea Cadets, so it's a comprehensive effort to try to do as much as we can with less and less volunteers in each of these organizations. So therefore, we go to the Armed Forces each year. The Pod Sox, the Pawtucket Red Sox, they have an Armed Forces night. So we go up there and parade our colors and, you know, a bunch of stuff. And locally we do the maintain some of the local memorials that are around town. Sisson, Sergeant, well, the other one there, I forget now. It's well, we just did the Blue Star Monument.
Blue Star Memorial there at the library.
Yeah.
Which I'd recommend everybody come down and take a look at. I think it's a great monument to our veterans who you know, paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I think the Garden Club and Carol Evans Carberry and also you guys at the VFW played a major role in getting that here.
Yeah, Portsmouth Garden Club really did an outstanding job on that.
Yeah.
One of the big things we are proponents of, and we conduct each year at the state level, but we also help them out from the local post level, is the Boys and Girls State. I'm not sure the VFW do.
We do not get involved
We
in
don't
that,
get
no.
involved. So each year the American Legion, they identify one student from each state. They go to Washington and they set 1 week, I believe it is, they go down and you know, get around the legislators, and they have their own little governments established.
Sort of a leadership
And
program, yeah.
legislative stuff. So that's one of the things the American Legion is big on.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned about flags, normally on Memorial Day, both the American Legion and the VFW, along with Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts and Girl Scouts and other organizations, they reflag the veterans' graves in the various cemeteries throughout Quidnick Island and throughout the nation. So the reflagging of graves, I think, is another major program that both organizations become involved with.
Yeah, and I know both of you also do a lot of scholarship works, and not just for veterans, but for other people. And you do awards for teachers and a bunch of other things that are really community related. And I was quite impressed with the list of things that the VFW does, for example.
Well, VFW, we just completed what we call the Gleason Scholarship, which is a $1,000 scholarship on an annual basis. A student who has a family member involved with the Portsmouth VFW post, they write an essay, they are reviewed, and the top one is chosen to receive the $1,000 scholarship. This year we had 2 individuals, so we're almost neck and neck, so we've granted 2 scholarships this year of $1,000 apiece.
Yeah.
Other scholarship programs that the VFW has on an annual basis, they do the Voice of Democracy and the Patriots Pen. Our post has been involved in the Voice of Democracy for many years. The English teacher at the Portsmouth High School, one of her class projects for her better students, if we'll say, writes the essays, and they record their essay. It has to be 5 minutes plus or minus a few seconds. And then once they get that done, they will submit those essays and recordings to our VFW post. We have a 7-member scholarship committee. Take a look at all those, and they're graded. The top 3 are acknowledged at the Portsmouth High School Awards Day in the spring. The top winner goes to the district, competes in the district. Normally the district winners, they're graded by faculty at the Naval War College, and then they go on to the state level. The state winner goes to national.
Wow.
And there's a lot of different money involved as far as the scholarships go. They also have 4 others, the Scout of the Year, Eagle Scouts and Girl Scouts and so forth. Normally the other ones do not participate with the exception of the Eagle Scouts, but we've been doing that for quite a few years. And I happen to be the the chairman of the organization for the VFW National Scouts, Eagle Scouts, and I and my committee would take a look at what they have and pick what we believe is the best of the group, and they are honored at the state convention down in Providence.
Oh, that's
so
great.
It's really good.
Well, I have to put a personal plug in for the American Legion because they're one of our heritage sponsors of the 375th. They basically donated $5,000, which will eventually all go towards this library project that we're trying to work on, library fund. But even beyond that, though, I can't thank George and John Mangold and Sue Santos and all the folks in the parade committee, many of whom were veterans themselves, for stepping forward and doing such a great job in the parade. Everything I've heard about the parade, even from the Lord Mayor in Portsmouth, England, has been fantastic. And I just, your leadership in this thing, George, was deeply appreciated, as is the continual support that we get from the American Legion. So I just want to throw that plug in there for that, because it's a vital part of what we do.
I think the Lord Mayor wrote a nice letter thanking a lot of folks here in Portsmouth for hosting her and her companion and the other mayors during that great weekend that we had.
Yeah, no, all of our guests have been very gracious about their praise for what we went through. And again, in large part to our vets. You guys had several entries in our parade itself. They made it kind of special, I thought. And I think it was probably the biggest parade we've ever had in Portsmouth in terms of people turning out. At least I'd like to think that. Of course, I've only lived here 26 years, so I really can't say. But anyway, you guys do great work. When it comes to projects, how do you guys decide what kind of projects to take on?
For the American Legion, we have several programs that are identified from the national level that fall into, categories that we can support locally, providing we have the volunteers and the funding to support. Americanism, the oratorical program, which students can compete. They go through a competitive thing at the state and national level if they make it that far for funds, scholarship monies. We have a junior shooters program at the Newport Rifle Range. It's very, very well run. The lady that runs it, Michelle McCukovic, she is an expert herself. We had one of the ladies that went through the junior shooters program. She got a scholarship to the appointment to the Army Academy, and she's on the rifle team.
At West Point. Yeah.
West Point, yeah.
Yeah.
So the Veterans Affairs, and we also sponsor a baseball team locally, Tom's Lawn and Garden. But Veterans Affairs themselves, We do a lot of work at the Veterans Home in Bristol. We do bingos. We do Christmas shops. We do, you know, we invite the veterans to come to some of the activities in the state. So, you know, and I must say, though, that there are a lot of organizations that support the Veterans Home in similar styles and fashions. So it's not just the American Legion or the VFW, but we're heavily involved in that.
Well, I think everybody should be, really. Now, on things like that, can you guys use volunteers who are not members? Could people just come up and say, hey, we'd like to help you out?
Yes.
And we'll get, in a minute, we'll get to the contact information, but I think the point is, I guess, if people have questions, they should contact the
and you'd be surprised the amount of people that do not even consider joining because they don't, you know, it's not a topic of conversation every day. If they had grandparents or, you know, their uncles and nieces that were in the military, the veterans, they have an opportunity to join as an auxiliary member, or they just come down and help us reflag graves. That's a lengthy process, and the people that are doing it are getting up in age, so.
Well, we're always looking for younger members, and I think both the American Legion and the VFW, you'd like to have the image of being family friendly, contrary to what some of the old stereotypes are about what service organizations are about. But as far as the VFW post goes, as I mentioned, we've been in existence since 1946, and it's named after Alvera E. Vieira, who is a Portsmouth resident. Joined the Navy in 1939, I believe it was, and then after boot camp reported aboard the USS Arizona, and unfortunately he is still entombed on the USS Arizona along with a lot of his other shipmates as a result of the December 7th attack. And I think there were about 1,500 officers and men aboard the Arizona, and only 337 survived the attack.
Yeah, I think your point is good, though, George. Almost everybody's got a relative in the past. Certainly, World War II was a massive, draft, which would make them eligible then to become part of the auxiliary. Your point, though, Carlton, too, the issue of bringing in new blood, get the new kids into here, you know, and it's got to be tough because when these kids come back, they come back to a world which is, we don't even feel like we're at war over here. I mean, it's like going out of a combat zone, flying back to the U.S. and everything's business as usual. I think that's the real challenge for all of these veterans organizations, is to try to get new blood, new guys.
I think so, and if I can interject, one of the programs that VFW Post in Portsmouth does, all members who are not life members and also looking for new members, we pay for memberships of active duty military men and women. We pay for World War II. We pay for Korea and any Purple Heart recipients. So probably about 15 or 20 involved in that particular numbers game, if you will. And I think it's great to be able to honor our past veterans and the current veterans and get them involved in the VFW and also the American Legion, and allow them to get all the information about the VA benefits that they so richly deserve. Yeah,
and I think, too, these younger people coming out of the service now, after 3 or 4 years of multiple deployments, they have a lot in common with everybody else that's been there at one point, and it may not be exactly the same, but they'll have somebody who will listen to them and understand what their issues are. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, to find some friendly environment where you can sit down and talk about stuff, and I think that's what a lot of these young kids need.
I think the VA recently has just come up with something. They're going to try to push an outreach program, and that's when they're going to start identifying some people, I believe, that didn't realize they was eligible for anything.
Yeah, I think that's really important, that our kids know what they are entitled to. The other thing, though, I keep talking about guys, and I shouldn't do that because women make up a big chunk of the military anymore. Are women joining as well, the VFW and American Legion, as male veterans are as well?
We do have a lot of women that are members of both the American Legion and the VFW. In fact, the VFW district commander is a female veteran, member of the Middletown Post 4487. And I think she's doing a great job. And they have been Women VFW and American Legion Post Commanders. Christine is a good example.
Sure.
Is that one, yeah. One of the other things that we mentioned before about different organizations, the Aquidneck Island Stripers Club meet at our VFW post, and they do a great job of having various tournaments to honor one of our past members, Christopher Potts, who unfortunately was killed on his 38th birthday in Iraq a few years ago. But a lot of the fish that they get, they donate to veterans that need some additional food supplies. So the Aquidneck Island Stripers Club is one of the organizations that kind of meet at our post and do a lot of things for all the various veterans.
And they connect up with you about finding the vets and people to help out?
Basically, in fact, many of the members of the Stripers Club are also members of our VFW post. So there's kind of a hand-in-hand coordination there.
Okay.
So that works out really great.
Yeah, that's great. And it's great that these other organizations will jump in and recognize the need, and I think, you know. How can people get involved? How can people support you guys? And how can people actually join? What are they, you know,
Just,
if they're veterans, they can join, right?
We have membership applications that we can provide them, but they can find the application online at the, AmericanLegion.org or VFW.org. So therefore, we can guide them on their membership, either if they're eligible or not. So we can do that by contacting
we
us.
just had the contact information up for the American Legion, and I'm sure we'll be putting up for the VFW shortly, so people can contact the post. If they're veterans, they probably should join.
I would highly recommend that. There's so many positive aspects, and not only finding about your VA benefits, but just the camaraderie of being able to talk to other veterans. And some of the times, things that happen in the military you really wouldn't want to share with your civilian counterparts, but we've been there and done that, so I think we might be able to help out a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
How about non-members? How about civilians? How can they help?
As George mentioned, the various activities, reflagging of the graves, coastal cleanups, a lot of different things like that. Just volunteer. And volunteerism is, I think, a big part of both VFW and American Legion organizations.
Yeah, and I think just supporting your causes, donating money, time, effort, whatever you guys are doing. I know you do because you do a lot of things that try to raise awareness, raise funds for vets, and you want people to come out and support those things.
I think one of the things, as far as raising funds, periodically you'll see the little canisters at the various places of business with the poppies in there.
Yes.
For the poppy fund. And as far as the VFW goes, the funds that are gathered from the poppy funds, they're restricted funds to help veterans only and veterans in need. So it's not for almost anything else.
And those funds are allocated by who? The national level folks?
No,
for the
well, the
various
national
posts.
does have emergency funding.
Okay.
Depending on the size of the dilemmas and all that. So.
Well, I got to tell you, when we started working on this 375th celebration that we've been going through all year, it was a year ago. It was over a year ago.
Yep.
And I looked around and said, who can we get? None of us know how to do a parade. Who could do this? So I got George. He brought in his military background as a chief radioman. Why is it that the vets seem so well organized, and why is it
we were trained well?
Well, I kind of agree with that.
Skills. Yeah, leadership and organizational skills. We can kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, I think so. And we're just about out of time, but I'd like to thank you guys and thank your organizations, and I hope everybody out there will support these folks and what they're doing, which I think is vital. If you're an American, we got to support our veterans. Thanks very much. We'll see you in the next edition of Portsmouth This Week.